Hey guys, it's Chandler, and welcome to the Healing Heroes.
I promise you.
I'm Chandler Stroud, an executive, wife, and busy mom of two, who after years of living with anxiety, health struggles, and an unshakable feeling like I should be happier, made a profound discovery that changed everything. Join me on a journey where unexpected paths lead to healing and more happiness. On this show, we'll explore unconventional ways to unlock more joy in your own life with the help of my very own healers and trusted advisors, the Healing Heroes. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Healing Heroes. I am so excited to have Karen with me today. And for those who missed our first episode together, Karen is my myofascial release therapist. And we're going to talk a little bit about myofascial release, what it is, why it's important. If you did miss the first episode, I highly recommend you go back because we had such a great first conversation. And Karen, thank you so much for coming back. I am so thrilled to be here with you again. And for listeners, today we're going to shift the conversation slightly. We're still talking about all things myofascial release, the benefits of this practice. But today we're going to talk about it through the context of women's health and how it can specifically support and benefit the normal functions of the female body, both physically and emotionally. So I think it's going to be a really rich conversation, and I'm so excited to have it with Karen. Before we dive in, I do want to give a quick refresher on Karen's background. So Karen began her journey as a modern jazz dancer and instructor until a horrific motorcycle accident changed the course of her life. She is now dedicated to helping others live pain-free existences and educating on the benefits of myofascial release, or more fondly known as MFR. Karen is both a licensed physical therapist assistant and a licensed massage therapist. Ultimately, though, she became a student and now expert instructor of the John F. Barnes MFR therapy, which she's now practiced for over 25 years. Karen, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here again. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chandler, for having me. This is a great opportunity just to share and to get things out there to help people to figure out what's going to be best for them.
That's exactly what we're doing here. We are just educating and providing new insights so that you listeners can figure out what feels most authentic to you in terms of things you might want to dabble in to, again, reconnect with that intuition, your best self, and feel healthy in your body once again. And so I do want to preface this, and I did say this at the beginning of our last episode, but for those that don't know, myofascial release has been such a transformative experience for me. I used to say to my therapist all the time as we were going back and kind of digging up those past wounds, like, hey, Jen, I'm feeling really good about the progress we've made. Like, I've really overcome a lot. I know there's still a lot to work through, but I feel all of that progress in my mind. I feel at times that my body is still in this state of alarm or reacting in ways that don't feel consistent with the new me that I feel in my head. And I didn't know how to get my body over the line. And actually, it was Kate who led me to Zach in human design reading. He told me to check out MFR. And so I found Karen, and MFR was truly the missing piece that I was looking for. And I really felt like it accelerated the healing of that emotional trauma that was being stored in my body. And so that's just my plug to begin the conversation, that myofascial release has just been so beneficial for me. So Karen, just to get us started, do you mind maybe sharing just a quick overview of what our fascia is and its role in the human body so that everyone's starting from the same baseline?
Fascia is a tough connective tissue, and it's made up of elastin and collagen, and it is fluid filled. So if you think of a garden hose, it has a protective outside, but inside there's water flowing through it when that hose is turned on. And if you were to step on that hose, that fascia, it will stop the flow of fluid inside. So that can cause a restriction over time. The hose gets kinked. So things aren't flowing 100% anymore. they might be flowing 50% or 30% or 70%. So you want to take the pressure off of that part of your system by using myofascial release. And it will open the system back up so that the water in that hose can flow more freely.
So that was a really clear analogy for everybody.
Yeah, and our body is filled with fluid. We're 70% or so fluid filled. And all of the microtubules that are involved with fascia are fluid filled. And they contain this beautiful chemistry of ground substance that has the ability to send messages to the rest of our body when a trauma has occurred or when there's an injury or microtrauma over time that's kind of brewing and that inflammation starts. And our body has its own anti-inflammatory making properties that the fascia makes aware, okay, we need to send the interleukins there. We need to do this. We need to make these guys aware so there's no infection starting. So the fascial system, in many respects, is like first responder. Even before the nervous system catches up to the changes, our fascial system has already been at work, helping to protect the area that has been injured or has a stressor put on it.
Wow. And we have fascia all over our body, right? It's not
everywhere.
Limited to one area.
It's head to toe in one continuous sheet. So it's like taking a piece of saran wrap, pulling it tight, and if you poke in the middle, you're going to see all of those little ridges and misshapen places start because now there's been an interruption to that sheet. So there are many things that can cause our fascia to have injury to it. It's right underneath our skin. It's part of our skin. So like when you lift, you're actually lifting.
If you're not looking on YouTube, she's actually pinching the skin on her hand
and just lifting straight up. Yeah. So we affect the fascia just by doing that. And there are some treatments that involve just gently lifting tissue off of a restricted area.
Wow. That's so fascinating. I just love this whole world. And I think it's so new to so many people that I just can't hear you explain it enough. It's such a fascinating part of it's an organ, right?
It's everywhere inside of us. So you can't separate one thing without having fascia involved in it. In fact, muscle is 80% fascia. So basically we are fascia with muscle tissue. It's really kind of reversed.
So what is myofascial release? How would you explain the practice of myofascial release and its benefits to listeners who haven't heard of it before?
During a session, we're here to assess where you have restrictions in your fascia. The other example that is often used is if you have a knit sweater and say that you pull one string down by your waistline, that line of pull is going to travel to wherever that piece of thread goes. And usually when you're knitting, it's one piece of yarn that just continues to make a bigger piece. So it's our job to find where those restrictions are and open them back up so that function to the body part and the whole body in general is going to get benefit from having the restrictions released.
I love that. And it's really putting your hands on the body and massaging those areas that need to become unblocked, correct?
So yes, it's different than massage in the fact that it's point specific at times, and other times there's a more general approach to something. It's not necessarily if I work on one leg, I'm going to work on another leg, or one shoulder and then the other shoulder, because one shoulder may not need what's happening and where the restrictions are giving the line of pull.
Which is so cool, you guys, because I'm having this aha moment. There's been a few times where I've been with you and you've done my right leg or my left arm. And I'm like, oh, she forgot the other side. And now I'm like, no, that was just never the intention because I didn't need it there. That's so cool.
Right. So it's a matter of reading the body, seeing how the patient's holding themselves. Oftentimes when you are on an area that is restricted, Something called a vasomotor response will occur distant to the site that you're working on. And that just means your tissue starts to get blood flow through it. It's a trigger for us to know that's another place that needs to be worked on because it's connected to where I'm working on now, which is why when you're on the treatment table, even though if you need a sheet because, you're cool or your body needs that, we need to check and see. We need to be able to look at other parts of you as we're working to see where else this line of pull or restriction or trauma or tension is going. The other thing that's critically important for us to look for is a person's emotional reaction to things. What is their face doing? Are they squinting? Are they frowning? Are they getting teary-eyed? Are they starting to emote something up through their throat, through their voice? Because it will start to release emotion that has been stuck inside that trauma. And that's another component that you have to be ready to work with when someone is truly there for healing, because sometimes things come up out of your subconscious once that area of your body is being touched and it's opening and there's a healing starting, it'll affect you emotionally. Sometimes you might feel extremely energized during or after treatment, and sometimes you may feel exhausted like you haven't slept in weeks, and you leave and you're like, oh man, what's going on? Well, that's just your body's response to what we just opened up. And it takes so much energy to hold on to pain and trauma. That just zaps us from our ability to be more awake and aware and in our bodies in a better way. Sometimes really severe traumas can cause people to kind of check out. And they're living out here. And they bump into things all the time. They're always they seem to have repeat accidents. They fall down. There's a lot of ways to determine that, but also there's a sense when you touch a person's body, how they feel. Are they actually in there? Are they connecting with all of their energy within themselves? And that is always an amazing process to see happen. And usually when someone allows themselves to come back into their own body, because that fear or just the pain that they've been dealing with is no longer forefront. So it's like this freedom happens and they can start to relax, and it's like a new emotion. It's a new way of being.
Dr. Tama Bryant, who I adore her work, she calls it a homecoming. And that was one of the impetuses for me even doing this whole healing journey, was listening to an interview she did with Mel Robbins and then reading her book, Homecoming, about how we do disconnect from our bodies. And sometimes there are many cases where people haven't even met their true selves.
Yes.
I would argue I may have been one of those people. And it can be quite emotional when you finally come home to yourself. And I think you do that through the connection of the mind, the body, and then, of course, the spirit. All three are really important components. And I know we throw those three terms around a lot these days in a lot of the different holistic healing and discussions we have around health. But there really, truly is something to that. It is really important. You cannot fully come home if you're missing one of those three components. As I learned in therapy, I mean, I was already embarking on a spiritual journey, returning to the church after years away, and I was doing all of the therapy, but somatically I felt stuck. I felt stuck in this old version of my body, and you and Jacques and others really helped me drop back down and connect with that part of myself that I had disconnected from so long ago.
Right.
So I think that's really important. The other thing I would just say to listeners, and we'll have many more in-depth conversations about this, but I think a lot of people hear trauma and they think, oh, well, what I experienced wasn't really trauma, or it's not as serious as somebody else's trauma. But just a reminder, yes, there are physical traumas that happen to your body, but the emotional trauma can be oftentimes something seemingly innocuous. It's not what happens to you. It's how your body interprets what happens to you.
Correct.
And that can be, dealing with a very distressing emotional circumstance like, again, loss, grief, abuse, abandonment, all of those things. But you can also experience trauma from things that you didn't get and needed as a young child. So those are just some examples, and I don't want to go too much off on a tangent here, but one of the reasons we talk about reconnecting with yourself and dropping back into your body is to go back and examine if there are stored emotions or micro traumas or macro traumas that you maybe thought you had processed, gotten away from, weren't impacting you. And I encourage you to go back and revisit, because if there's something there, I guarantee it's still holding you back from achieving the levels of happiness, good health, and just general wonder that you want in your life day to day.
Yes. And I find that across the board, men or women, children of any age, someone could have just made a comment to you about how you look, a body part, your nose, whatever it may be. And whatever else you might be going through at the time, it just stings. And then you blow it off. But then somehow you're always walking around or looking in the mirror or trying to fix that part, or, you're now uncomfortable with yourself. Your self-confidence starts to change. So you're right. There's many ways that we can become affected by how our body feels. And as far as like women's health goes, it's amazing to me when we are in seminar and the therapists work on each other, because we need to know how to experience what we are now going to be performing on a person. And there's no better way to be able to absorb that and be able to share that than experiencing it yourself. And it's amazing to me that when it comes to the female body, having been 25 years now of doing this work, when it comes to breast tissue, and we start to work on and talk about the breast tissue, there are so many women who are just so traumatized by the look of their breasts because of whether society has given us this picture of the Barbie doll or whatever got set in your mind. A sibling could have teased you for having a flat chest, or whatever the circumstance might have been. It sticks. And then again, we walk around either covering ourselves up, we're embarrassed, or some people, it's the opposite. They go another direction and they're like just showing everything they can because they're going to prove that to be wrong. So we carry these emotional baggages with us about our body from little examples and things we hear, messages through TV or on the playground or wherever it may be, in a workplace or just even out having fun with a group of friends. Sometimes those things that we think we're teasing about are really hitting a sore spot with someone. And it's interesting to me to see that that particular part of a woman's body brings up so much emotion when you are working with the breast tissue. And there are many reasons to work with breast tissue. And there's so many people recovering from breast cancers and who've had to have biopsies and now their breasts are misshapen, or they've had to have mastectomies and they're considering whether or not they want to have the implants to replace what has been taken from them. There's so much emotion wrapped around our breast tissue. This is where we feed our children from.
Can you give examples of some of the types of things that would cause restrictions in female fascia?
Okay, so both for male and females, it could be a hard fall. It could be a blow to the abdomen. It could be a issue with a repetitive shoulder trauma, because again, fascia connects everywhere, but a female's pelvis is different because our anatomy is just different. We have broader, flatter bone surfaces, so it's more easily torqued. And you could just step off of a step and your pelvis is now going to shift. and one of your ilium will roll one way and the other one will stay back here. And now all of those organs in between, all that fascia that's attached now is twisted. It's like taking a towel and twisting it, because you've got your bones that are connected to ligaments and tendons and muscles and blood vessels and all throughout every system in our body, with just one simple misstep off a curb. And then your body goes into protective mode. So it might hold it there. Like, okay, we don't want to go any more direction. So it holds it there. And over time, fascial restrictions, things start to tighten down. The fluidity that should be running through those open hoses, those microtubules of liquid, are now being squished. There's pressure being put on it because our fascia is holding us in a protective way. And then our body over time starts to take that as normal. So what should be feeling more like filet mignon becomes like beef jerky.
Great analogy.
Literally.
I mean, scary, but good analogy.
And it's very true. Like, you can feel in a person's body where it just feels ropey. It feels like a piano wire. And especially working internally, our bladders are there, our uteruses are there, all of those things that help us to reproduce or have a healthy cycle are affected. So that's where our job is, to come in and see, feel. I say see, see with our hands, feel where there's heat, where there's tightness that shouldn't be, where your body's holding something. Those dysfunctional patterns that we just fall into because our bodies want to keep moving, and it will keep us moving, but it might not be in the 100% of a functioning way. So everything tightens down. And when that happens, when fascia starts to get restricted and fresh blood flow, oxygen, all those wonderful nutrients we're putting in our body are just not getting to the tissue as best as they can if they're opened up. So once you work with the tissue, it learns, when myofascial release is done correctly, that it doesn't have to protect anymore, which is, again, where this is different from massage. We're not just kind of rolling over and moving tissue and on a surface level. Some of the pressures we use are pretty deep, as you've experienced.
Yes.
And some of them are very light, almost off the body. And there are times when people are so sensitive, you have to start off the body, because there's still a connection of energy between my hand and that person's tissue, wherever I am. And a lot of times people will comment, your hands feel like they're on fire. And I'll say, it's a reflection of what's happening in you. So they're not necessarily feeling it in their own body, because, again, they've checked out that part of their body. They've left that out here. So it's a way of helping them come back in and feeling the heat within their own body. It's interesting, just because of our anatomy and what we have to go through, just even in a normal gynecological exam. I can't tell you how many times women will say, well, I just check out when I'm in there because it's uncomfortable. It's, it's just done in a very medical way, which it should be.
Yes, as it should, but I understand.
Right. But women will check out because it's uncomfortable. It's almost like they're not really asked certain questions, or just the whole process is very medical, and we have to do this and get it done, and bing, bang, boom. When you're being treated with myofascial release, internal work is not always the first place we start. We start externally, and we try to correct everything that can be corrected externally. But when it's necessary, we do work internally. And that can release so much emotion. It's unbelievable. The things that we hold inside, again, the traumas, whether it be sexual trauma, abuse, a hard birthing experience. There are so many different backstories that can bring a woman to not feeling healthy in their pelvis or with their sexual organs. it's just a beautiful process when someone will allow themselves to feel all of those hard things that they need to feel to let that stuff open and go. Sexual trauma is oftentimes something that is not mentioned during an assessment, but sometimes it takes a few treatments for someone to finally open up and say, well, I had this happen to me. There's shame in that. There's embarrassment in that. There's a loss of power in that. And we just don't have the capacity at sometimes to deal with it because we're not old enough to understand what's even happening when those situations occur. So of course you're stuck in that little girl place of being scared and not knowing what to do. And all of those emotions just start to spill, which is what you need to happen so those parts of you can heal as a whole person. And then you walk out of it on the other side of it. And once that tension starts to open up, other things start to come out. So it's interesting, for every centimeter you lean forward from your hips in your back, if you can imagine, all of the fascia in your body, as you lean forward incorrectly, you're putting 2,000 pounds of pressure per square inch on your body just by leaning forward incorrectly. Your fascial system kicks in to protect, and all that pressure just starts to squish everything inside. That's why so many people have back pain, because we don't correctly use our legs or the strength of our abdomen, our core muscles. Right? So, and of course, our abdomen is part of, and our back, like that's what's holding all of our pelvic bowl. We consider the pelvis. Pelvis actually means a bowl. And part of the, even the assessment process is to see, is your bowl tipped forward or is your bowl tipped backward? And that's going to give us a hint too about wherever else your restrictions are coming from. And we need to put the bowl back in balance so that you're not pouring everything forward when you're not pouring everything backward. And sometimes if you just observe people as they walk, you can see they've got the little belly pooch. Well, not that they might not be fat, but they just have this little rounded belly. And that's because their pelvis is forward and everything is coming forward. Or someone has a really flat back and everything's kind of tipped backwards. So all of that tension on their back is trying to hold them up. The physical and the emotional part of the trauma are intertwined. Even if you slip and fall, there, there's a little bit of fear. There's, oh, that hurts. If you were already in an emotional state because you were angry or upset with something and you just had a fight with the person you really care about, and all of a sudden you walk out the door and you slip and you fall, things get trapped inside of us from just even that anger we had or the hurt that we might have just felt because something was said to us that hurt us. There's just so many components to how emotion can get trapped into a body part. And spiritually too, our belief systems of what we grew up believing in and what our cultural beliefs are can also affect us. We have these ideas of how we're supposed to be depending on what we grew up with believing in or choosing to believe. And that can really affect us a lot as well. I have treated women who, an older woman, she was phenomenal, open to treatment, open to healing. She was 76 years old and her father was her perpetrator and started to sexually abuse her at 2 years old.
Oh my God.
And this continued. And she knew her mom knew, but didn't have whatever it would have taken for her to have said anything to stop it. She had suspicions at a certain age that her sister was also being abused, which ended up being true. But in her own story, she came to me on the phone saying, I think I need your work because I have been going to talk therapy for over 50 years. And I can't shake what has happened to me. I've had horrible relationships with men ever since. I can't stay in a relationship. I have all this fear now. She said, talk therapy. I can't talk about it anymore. There's nothing left to discuss. So she came and we started again. No internal work was even necessary because she was so open and had an understanding that words weren't necessary. She had never ever given herself permission to feel all of those hard feelings that needed to be felt, all of the guilt of not knowing and feeling like she should have been able to help herself. But then in the realization, you were two, you didn't have the capacity to help yourself. So we went through this dialogue and hands-on treatment. And at some point I said to her, what do you need? And she said, I need to push him off of me. So I got up onto the table and I put some weight through her upper body and I said, push back. And she started to push me off. And you only do this to gentle resistance. She pushed me off and I says, what do you need to do now? And she says, I've never run away. I need to run away. I says, get up, get off the table, run through my house, run, just go run. And she literally ran around my house. I don't even know how many times. She came back into the treatment room. She literally collapsed on the floor. And I sat next to her and I says, what do you need now? And she says, I just need to cry. Will you hold me? And that's what we did.
Wow.
And she was forever changed. She needed to express that physicality of getting that person off of her and having the ability to get herself up onto her own 2 feet and running away and getting out of the situation. She never had completed that process of the trauma.
I mean, that one's pretty intense.
Very.
I understand. I mean, wholeheartedly. Guys, I was pretty forthcoming with my own sexual abuse when I approached Karen in the first place because I had been in therapy for so many weeks, months at that point. I wasn't making progress in the way that I would have expected and wanted to make progress. I was making great progress with Jen, and the talk therapy had been so powerful for me, so powerful. But I still felt held back. And I was, hearing stories like that and in particular make me very appreciative of the fact I felt comfortable enough to confide in you during our first session that is why I was there to heal. Because I think we've been able to kind of focus in on that and use that in a lot of the work. And I do always feel like I'm in a safe space if something gets triggered and I need to express that in any moment. I do feel like it's a safe space. My personal experience with it has been that the 1 or 2 times I think I felt triggered by the work happened shortly after I left the treatment room, once I was home again and had some moments of silence and peace to myself. But I absolutely understand how that could happen on the table.
Yes, everything is about what you need. And when you're here for treatment, it's your experience and it's your body. And I have utmost respect. And there's a safe word, and we use that safe word, and it doesn't matter. I don't need any verbal explanation. If you say the safe word, my hands come off, and we regroup, and it's up to you where you want to continue. That's a huge part of healing, is trusting who you're working with.
Yeah.
And anything that is said or done in that room does not leave that room.
I think that's really important. It's a very consistent theme we hear in all of our conversations across this show is you have to feel safe with the person you're with in order to fully unfold and heal in those moments. And I don't think that's ever going to change. So don't feel bad if you're exploring different practitioners and something feels off. It's completely within your right and encouraged to shop around and maybe find someone
Yes.
else that you feel even more comfortable with or connect with on a different level. Any practitioner in these modalities, spaces, approaches is going to understand and not be offended. I mean,
Right.
personalities are all different. I noticed that a lot of the patients that you're talking about are older and making these huge changes later on in life. Have you treated younger women that might be having issues with fertility, let's say? Anyone that's maybe had problems with that, and how myofascial release has helped her?
Yes, absolutely. There are several women who I have helped come to become pregnant. And oftentimes, again, there's a torque in your system where all of those beautiful parts that we have that create life are kind of being cut off and strangled to some degree. And once we open up the area, the tissue, that sometimes it's all it takes. And then all of a sudden they get pregnant. Sometimes it takes a few months and sometimes it happens quickly. There's people of all different ages that I have helped get through that, or just simple, but it's not simple menstrual cramps. If your psoas muscle isn't correct, that's putting pressure right there up against other things that are our female organs that are now again being compromised because they're not having the full space or the ability to move and slide and glide and do all those things they need to do.
What about the woman who just feels exhausted all the time and incredibly stressed out and tense in her own body? Do you think myofascial release could be a good solve for that sort of distress or condition?
Yes, absolutely. Because there's somewhere in your system that there are restrictions which are taking your energy from you. Depression sometimes can be helped just by working through different parts, literally of the back of your head, different parts of your body, increasing sleep. It affects all systems, respiratory, lymph. So when you start getting the work done, everything starts to shift. So you feel better in general, and then you want to keep feeling better. So then you start to walk a little more, whereas you didn't have the energy to, or you start getting back to an activity that you were really enjoying. There's so many people who are under so much stress now, and this work can help with just that, just coming in because you're stressed. And then there's this, a process during the evaluation that will figure out, okay, where is this coming from?
Even if you're not having a fertility issue or some other form of physical ailment that's specific to the female body, we carry a lot in our fascia, is what I've learned from you. And I think even if you haven't experienced that trauma, whether physical or emotional, and you just feel exhausted at the end of every day, you maybe have a difficult time accessing meditation, for example, or yoga, or dropping back into your body. I think similar to acupuncture and some of those other practices, myofascial release can be really effective for that, because you are starting to open up blockages and restricted areas in the body that maybe you didn't know were there.
Most people will have a place in their body they hold their stress, whether it be shoulders, stomach, low back. There's a place. Headaches. It will eventually become a physicality. It just wreaks havoc on our bodies in many ways.
So mainly due, I think, to the inflammation, right? Stress causes incredible inflammation throughout our bodies.
Absolutely. And as I talked about earlier, the fascia holds those chemical reactions and responses to send the messages, to send the proper things to the area that need the anti-inflammatory properties that our own body makes. So you don't even have to take a Tylenol.
Well, I think there is a distinction because like, I feel like obviously I've gotten many massages in my lifetime to help the areas where I carry tension and stress, typically in my shoulders, upper back, neck area. Right. And it feels great. I always feel relaxed coming out of a massage. But I will say, I think the myofascial release experiences I've had with you are much more intentional. It's not just, I'm going to massage this area to loosen it up and make it feel better. I leave feeling very different, but that feeling extends beyond an hour or two post treatment. And I remember there was one time, a couple of times, I mean, I've gone to you when I didn't feel like going because I was scared I was going to get sicker. I was coming down with something. And you did a gentle, gentle treatment that just opened everything up. And by the time I left, I had color back. My throat didn't hurt anymore. I mean, it was amazing. I felt like a completely new person. So that was one example. But another one, I remember I was laying there, and oftentimes in our sessions, I know you pinpoint and put a lot of pressure in my abdomen area, kind of near my pelvic bone. And it's uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt per se. And one day you were up working on my upper back and neck area. I was on my back and you were like, I don't know why, but something is calling me over to this area. And you went down and you applied pressure where I'm used to you applying it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it was so painful, so painful. I'm like, yep, right there, nailed it. Got it. And like, I would never have known to send you down there. I didn't know it was feeling, irritated or inflamed that day, which sounds a little crazy, but you just felt it up in my neck and addressed it where it needed to be addressed. And I truly felt wholly different, not just physically, but mentally too, both
Yes.
leaving your treatment room, but then throughout the rest of my day and arguably into the rest of my week. So I thought
Yes.
that was a really cool experience and just speaks to exactly what you're saying.
Yep, that's how this works.
It's awesome. Can't say enough good things, guys.
That's awesome.
What would be your message to that one woman who was listening to us today and thinking that myofascial release might be the answer to whatever problem she has been and continues to face? Is there something you would tell her or encourage her to think about as she is considering her own healing journey?
I would say you are worth it, whatever it is. Who you are is enough. And you certainly should be taking care of yourself so that you can go through your life and help take care of the other people that are important to you. I think women are so used to being there for other people. And we really need to learn to honor who we are and to know our value and to make sure that we're all in a good place. It will help you in ways that you may not even foresee. And that's what happened to me when I first came as a patient into this work. The benefits just webbed out into my life in ways I could have never, ever been able to predict. Because when you start to feel good, you have the energy, you just have the confidence. You feel more whole. Your authenticity shines through because you're not walking around with whatever it is that you've initially come to me for. And you don't have to have a specific, like I said, diagnosis. Sometimes you're not given a specific diagnosis, and that's what oftentimes will send a person looking for who can help me with this because I'm not being given a diagnosis. I'm not being given a certain set of words or direction that I should go in. It doesn't matter why you're coming in. Just come in and experience this. And then you can decide whether it's right for you or not. What have you lost? A little bit of time because you had to take time out to experience this, a little bit of money to figure out if this is what's for you or not. We all have our own healing journeys and we all find the things that help us from different ways of arriving. But once you've arrived, you're like, wow, okay, I'm not stepping away from this now. My hope is to get this out to people because just so many don't realize that it's here. Like a lot of the wonderful things that you've done for yourself, Chandler, and you sharing this is just a great gift to a lot of people. I know people will benefit from what you are hosting here.
Well,
So
thank you, Karen. I
thank
really
you.
appreciate you saying that. And amen to that. You are worth it. And it really is such a transformational experience if you let it be and you feel safe enough with your practitioner to heal alongside them and let them guide you in that journey. So thank you so much for being that for me and for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation and appreciate your honesty and transparency and support as always. It really means the world. So thank you, Karen.
Well, it's an honor to share this. This work has changed my life, and it's just my way of giving back to help others to live in a better way with a better quality of life and functioning better. It's, we all deserve that.
We do. We do. We all deserve that.
Yeah.
That is, yes. Thank you.
You're
Agreed.
welcome.
Well, that's all we have time for today. So thank you again, Karen. And if you guys liked what you heard, please share it with friends and don't forget to subscribe. You can also visit healingheroespodcast.com to get resources, meet the heroes, and share your ideas for future episodes. Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time, remember, be curious, be courageous, and be kind to yourself. You've got this. Thanks for listening.